Well, hi everyone, and welcome to this month's Spotlight on interview. This is where we go in depth with a member of the Purple Space community of disability employee resource group and network leaders to explore the structures and the leadership traits that enable them to build disability confidence from the inside out. So I'm Brendan, I'm Director of Strategy and Networkology here at Purple Space, and this month I'm joined by Darren Rowan from Eli Lilly and Company. I've had the pleasure of knowing Darren for a while now, so he's a leader not just in the ERG world, but in the wider field of disability inclusion in business as well, so especially in the digital space. But today we're here to talk ERGs and specifically to explore this month's leadership theme, which is all about the art and the science of running a high impact disability ERG or network. So something that Darren is super qualified to talk about. So he is the international leader of Lilly's Enable ERG. He's Purple Space Ambassador. He's also the chair of our ERG Global Forum. Hey, Darren.
Hi, Brendan. Lovely
Thanks
to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. And before we dive into the ERG stuff, would love just to hear a few words of introduction from yourself. So where are you dialing in from? How long have you been with Eli Lilly? And what are you doing for a day job there?
Sure. So I live in the UK. I live probably about 25 miles southwest of London, a place called Surrey. I've been at Eli Lilly now for nearly 20 years, which I find almost quite shocking when I think about how long I've been here now. But yeah, I've been a program manager in that role in our sort of IT organization within Eli Lilly for around 10, 15 years at that time as well. So, tend to have done a lot of work around, first of all, IT, big implementations, and then moved more into working around a combination of business and IT type stuff, and more recently working with our product launches and our marketing side of things at our new medicines and those kind of launches.
Right, thank you. Wow, 20 years.
I know. Next month.
Yeah. Wow, happy anniversary.
Thank you.
So in terms of the disability side and the ERG side, then, can you tell us a bit about your journey? How does one end up being an international disability ERG leader?
Yeah, so I should say, first of all, I'm registered blind. I'm visually impaired, and I've been since I was 18. So I have that lived experience of disability, but it's kind of not something in the past that I really talked about too much in terms of openly sharing with people. I just thought that the way that you went about your business and proving yourself in a company like Lilly or even places where I worked before was to demonstrate that despite your disability, you could still, be as good a performer as anybody else, right? That was probably my mindset in those early years. But then there was an opportunity, I suppose, about 7 years ago, where actually a colleague was doing a lunch and learn, and it was on LGBTQ, and it was really interesting. There was a lot of things that he was talking about that really hit the mark with me as I thought about some of the things that not necessarily was hiding, but you just kind of realizing that this was part of your identity, but you almost were sort of shrugging it off because you thought that it was, again, not perhaps something that was that important to others to learn and know about that. And then realized that actually it became quite, as I thought more deeply about it, it became something that I thought, this is actually a big barrier to me in itself, and that I'm not really helping myself. And also, as I thought about the impact of some of the things I was just dealing with on a day-to-day basis, like things just generally not being accessible and me trying to work around it, it made me think that I'm probably not helping other people at the same time by me thinking that everything's good and then I'm working twice as hard around some of the issues. It just so happened that the same person really wanted to have a diversity inclusion summit and was asking for volunteers to do a sort of work stream in that event. So I volunteered to do one on disabilities, and a colleague who I'd never met before, who was also visually impaired, agreed to do that as well. And so we came together and we started sharing our experiences. And then obviously in the event itself, we shared some of those experiences. We brought some external people in. And it's fair to say neither of us knew anything about other disabilities really at that point. We just knew of our own experiences. But there was this immediate impact then when we shared with many of these leaders from across several countries in Europe and Canada, which was our kind of business unit geography at that time, who realized that, hey, you know, this was really impactful. What is it that we're going to take away from this? And I think at that point is when we agreed that the number one thing to do was to start an employee resource group outside of the US. So I have to say, first of all, there was one already that existed in the US. We are headquartered in the US as well. But there was nothing really established outside of the US for the many countries that we have a presence in, and that's around 120 countries, right? So we kicked this off with no idea what to do, and a very small group of us. We did get an executive sponsor, which was great, who again really didn't have any knowledge about this, but was very interested and keen to see, you know, about learning and supporting us. And it really went from there. So almost within the first year, I soon realized that I needed some external help. And that's probably the first time I met you, Brendan, actually. One of the first workshops I went to externally at the time to see what other companies are doing around specific areas. And then also I met Kate, who very kindly invited me to one of the Purple Space workshops. And I was like, this is it for me. You know, this is, I could then realize there were people in a similar position to me. There were people further down the route, down the journey, and they were looking more at re-engaging people. Others were looking at starting things. And my passion just grew and grew really to the point where I started getting totally immersed in everything to do with disability inclusion and accessibility. And I think as an ERG, we're called Enable, which is probably no surprise to many people because that's quite a common name. We realized probably after about 3 years, we created a lot of awareness through things like webinars and internal social media platforms. But we thought it's really important that people start to see some action coming out of this. And one of the things that I took to a senior VP of HR a few years ago was around having a global disability strategy. And that's where we've evolved from not just an ERG that initially, I suppose, was you know, in my case, was focused on this huge international region, but then switched it to becoming this global collaboration with our counterparts in the US, and then established our global disability strategy. And the first thing out of that is our accessibility program called Access Lilly. And the beauty of it for me is that I've been able to marry both my skills and day job as a program manager, and also, you know, what I've learned from being an ERG leader. And so now I'm heavily involved in driving that accessibility program forward.
Yeah. Wow. It's incredible to hear that arc from kind of managing disability, you know, struggling, feeling alone over a 7-year period of like building, making community, leaning in, and then to the point where you're influencing global policy and practice. Yeah, and that last point about marrying the skills from the day job. So yeah, like project management, systematic approach are definitely, they stand you well in the ERG leadership game.
Yeah.
But of course, our community of ERG leaders they have all kinds of day jobs. You know, some work in finance, some work in comms, and all of those aspects, you know, they can bring to bear in the ERG setting. But just wanted to ask maybe a bit more on the leadership side of ERG then. So we at Purple Space, Darren, I mean, you know this, but we invented the term networkology to describe the art and the science of running a high impact disability ERG. So the science being the mechanics of running a network, so governance, strategy, working with stakeholders, and the art being, I suppose, the softer skills, the you know, how do you make things happen in a voluntary role, off the side of your desk, outside your usual circle of influence. So listening to that definition, which the art and the science, which are you, Darren? Are you an artist or a scientist, or a bit of both?
I would say I'm a bit of both. I love the art of networkology because I think first and foremost I'm a people person. So I love building relationships, and I guess in the past I didn't think I was particularly good at networking, and yet since taking on this role, I think it's something that not only have I got much better at, but I've just loved it, right? Both internally and externally, just kind of, hey, this person might be interested to talk to around this, and they might support us with this. So I love doing that type of activity. But equally, the science is really important as well, and you know, how you have a good strategy in place, how you then have plans that relate to that strategy that are going to enable you to deliver on the goals that you set. I think as well around prioritization, those pieces that you do need to be very clear about that. And then obviously, I guess you can go back to the art piece again around how you communicate that in different ways, because it's really important to recognize that not one size does not fit all, right? So, you know, you might want to communicate your strategy, but depending on who you do that to, you'll use different methods to do that. And I think that's where you start to combine both of those things, the mechanics of having things like a good governance structure in place, which again comes from my program management experience. So that's always helpful. But recognizing that you're dealing with a much more informal setup in a sense with essentially a group of volunteers, right? So you've got to kind of mix those two things.
How do you balance that? So given your project background, so on that, in terms of the fundamentals of governance, how do you balance ensuring that there's enough coordinating style activity to keep the strategy on track with the need to keep bureaucracy at a minimum, given, as you say, it's a voluntary role and everyone's kind of working off the side of their desk?
It is something that's always been a challenge for me, because I always want to do more than what we're doing, right? So even when I was summarizing what we've done in the last 7 years, I suddenly realized it's a lot, but actually at the time when I'm doing it, I'm thinking this is not enough. So one of the things that I think I've learned over time is that we probably after the first year of getting together, we sort of established some key priorities, and we had sort of 3 key ones then, which I think was like awareness, employee support, and best practice. But then within each one of them, these pillars, we had a number of things that we're trying to go after. And because, you know, we had then much less in terms of our membership, and our core team was obviously all had day jobs, it's started to dawn on me that, hey, you know, we can't do all these things and do them well. So I think then it became, we need to kind of narrow down even further. So I think it's a sort of maturity thing that you gain yourself as well, knowing that it's not like a normal big program or a project I've been working on where I've been given resources at 50% or 100% of their time, and I can just say, hey, you're going to do these things, and you know, you're responsible for this. Yes, you can give out responsibilities to people, but you've got to recognize that ultimately their day job will come first, and sometimes some of those things will slip. But I think that the better you get in identifying what the priorities are, and almost like chunking it up a bit, right? What can we do in the first quarter of the year, second quarter, third quarter, and things like that, and making them realistically achievable is all I can say. I think I heard somebody say the other day in a meeting that I was in, because people do, the volunteers as well, they do beat themselves up, right, when they haven't achieved something. They've taken something on enthusiastically, and then they come back and apologize because they haven't been able to do it because something else came up in their day job. And somebody said that, you know, you've got to remember, whatever we do is great, right? Whatever we do, we're doing because it means something and we're passionate about it. And yes, you're going to give yourself a hard time, but even the smallest of things build up to make a lot of difference. And I think that everybody should remember that, you know, don't give yourself a hard time about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've pointed before around the importance of taking stock of what you have done, so you just rattled off an incredible sort of 7-year story that, as you in your day-to-day life, you will be moving at such a pace that you don't recognize that always as, an extraordinary achievement. But we're so quick, aren't we, to rush to the next thing?
Yeah.
That we sometimes don't recognize that actually we've achieved more than we think.
Yeah. I do try and actually make time once or twice a year to just think about what it is that we've done, because I'm terrible at giving myself a hard time on things, and I thought we'd have done this by now, but actually you do see that change does happen when you look back over it. So yeah, but I think we're in a really good place right now.
And it's a motivating and empowering thing then to be able to communicate out to the team as well, to reflect back to the team who might be sharing, sort of similar thoughts around it. We haven't done enough.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. And I mentioned that we have these sort of internal social media platforms, and that's one of the ways that we can communicate on these milestones, achievements, and things. And it in the past it was literally the same 2 or 3 people, but now you see the difference where you've got not only the fact that we've got more people involved globally in some of our more strategic projects. I mean, we've got over 1,000 people now in our global Enable group, and you just see a real mix of people, either sharing things that have been achieved, even like small things, hey, we've run this event in these teams and they've learned about the first level of accessibility or something, or maybe just some external sharings from events they've been to and things like that. And that to me just makes me realize that, hey, we've come a long way in hearing from different people's voices and perspectives.
Yeah. On the art side of that networkology equation, I was interested. You said that you didn't see yourself as a networker, or you didn't enjoy that side of either this role or, I don't know, business life. But I recently, something you said in a forum that we were both at, you really chimed with me. I heard you say that you had been described by a colleague as a subversive networker, and you also said that you took it as a compliment. So
yeah,
a few questions around that. So firstly, was it meant as a compliment, and then
yes,
why did you take it as a compliment?
Yeah. And just to clarify what I said, I wasn't very good at networking. It was more a case of, when people say, hey, you might want to speak to these people if you want to move forward with your career, that kind of networking, which I thought, I love meeting new people, but when it comes naturally, whereas in this role, I've certainly, had to sort of, in my way anyway, I've had to kind of go and connect with people because I think it's going to help us move forward with our kind of overall mission and vision. But yeah, that particular comment came because I was just describing something that I'd done when I came out of a meeting, and I tried to push a certain request through, and it didn't quite go in the way I'd hoped. It wasn't a no, but it was then pushed back, and I thought, oh, this is going to take quite some time if we wait. So I then described how I'd connected with some other leaders and found a slightly different route to go around it, and ultimately the result would be the same, and actually potentially even make that person feel like it was their idea. So I think whatever works, right? But I think the subversive networking, it can almost sound a little bit sinister, but I totally understood what they were saying, and I thought it was quite a good description of sometimes how you have to think on your feet, think creatively, be resilient. So you kind of take those knockbacks, but then say, okay, that didn't quite work. Was it me? Was it that person wasn't in the same place as me? And therefore, what are some of the alternative routes I could, put in place to get there, I guess. So, and I love, for example, when you speak or hear from Caroline Casey, she often calls herself a troublemaker, right, or a disruptor and things like that. And I think, we need a bit of that in this space sometimes for people just to, be open about things and call some things out, but also recognize that, whilst it means so much to yourself, everybody's going to be in a different place with what it is that you're trying to drive through. So you just got to think, as I say, creatively and around the things, and a bit of subversive networking. So yeah, it's not too sinister.
Yeah, well, look, it's certainly a phrase that resonated with the folks in that room, and it's been on my mind since then. And listen to you kind of unpack it a bit. Yeah, but you're describing what we see across the purple space community a lot, which is, I suppose, like the impactful ERG leaders. They don't shy away from the controversial issues. I mean, that's what they sign up to. They sign up to tackle them, but they do that in a way that enables them to kind of get around the roadblocks and shine a light on difficult topics without alienating the people that ultimately need to be on site to make the change.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a great description. And kind of leads on to my next question. I think you started to touch on some of the other leadership traits that you have had to either develop or lean on yourself. So you were talking about resilience and creativity. We talked about networking. I wonder if there are any others. Particularly interested whether you brought them into the role or whether you've had to learn and develop. Are there any other traits?
I think I've always been resilient, and I do think that's part of. We hear this a lot, right? I think that's part of having my disability as well. That you get so used to so many things not working in the way that you want them to work. Either, if that can be interactions with people, or it can be just, technically, working with using your screen reader with software. So you get so many of these daily battles that you build a pretty thick skin towards things, and you do get quite creative and in problem solving. But I never thought I was quite as creative as I turned out to be with, how you put different ideas, actually coming up with ideas in the first place around doing things, and then different approaches to trying to sell those ideas to people in a different way, which I love. I love kind of exploring that, and I love, to be honest, and I think that's always been in me as well. I think being a little bit edgy around this topic, but on that fine balancing act between not upsetting people, but equally not making this too sensitive a topic that ultimately we're not going to get anywhere. So I think finding ways to do that, maybe it was just in me, and then this allowed it to come out, the work that I've been doing. I don't really know, but certainly what I hope comes across is that I've always been authentic about this. I always want to learn about other people's experiences. I have, as I sort of described it earlier, immersed myself in this world because there was so much that I didn't know, and I didn't want to be seen as some sort of spokesperson for disability in Lilly if I had absolutely, only my own experiences to go on. So I've learned so much from other people. So I think always that willingness to learn. Yeah. I think interestingly, we did one of these exercises, right? Many companies do them where they have things like insights and strength finders. And a couple of mine were around communication and connectedness and things like that, which I always think I've had there in terms of value around understanding the big picture and how what you do impacts that. But actually, number one in my strengths was this thing called winning others over, which I always thought was a bit salesy, and I was a little bit embarrassed when it came up because I was like, I don't see myself as being one of those people. But then as I've thought about it more, it's that I'm always trying to, it's not trying to win people over to, get what you want, but it's more that it's a win-win situation. What's in it for them, and really understanding that more, and then bringing that to the fore when you're having these conversations around strategy or initiatives and things like that.
Yeah, really interesting. There's so many traits. Interesting that strength in sales as well. Like so many of those salesy techniques have carryover in all types of different settings. You're talking about the interesting strategy and the big picture as well. And my last question was about I suppose the biggest of big pictures, so I'm thinking about your role as the chair of the ERG Global Forum at Purple Space, and in particular the work that we have been undertaking together over the last few months. So Lilly is the co-sponsor along with the International Labour Organization's Global Business Disability Network, and we're building this resource that will set out the leadership traits, the structures that help create impactful ERGs in global companies. So yeah, interested first of all, why is accelerating the global growth of the disability ERG or network movement, why is that important to you?
Well, I think for me, straight away, it's I've seen the impact, as I described earlier, that an ERG can have, right? And then when you think of that in global terms with a company like ours that has this presence in many, many countries, when you unify the many experiences and voices of people with disabilities, that just adds to the power of what it is that you feel you need to change. And I think one of the things that in the global ERG forum that, as you mentioned, that I chair, it's for me it's always about learning from other people. Whilst I think we've done an amazing job so far, we are far from perfect in our global ERG. There's plenty more for us to do and for us to learn. And there's no better way of doing that than just talking to others in similar experiences, similar roles, see what they've done. It might be a slightly different take on what it is that you're already doing. It might be something completely different. And I think also we do have a responsibility to help others who are just starting out on this, because it is quite daunting. I thought it was daunting. I never thought it would grow to what it's become. But you do feel like you're taking on, some large responsibility here in what you do. And I just think that, as I mentioned, when I went to that first Purple Space workshop, it just made me feel like I belonged, but also made me feel more comfortable of having open conversations, and sometimes having that, whether that's put in black and white in the sort of report that everybody will see, or whether it's in forums when people can have open discussions. I just think that the more that's out there, the better it will be for everyone. And one of the comments I think that we had in our last forum, when somebody had seen the draft of what was to come, was saying that I believe that this will have impact beyond our organizations, so like that social impact, which again is the kind of stuff we hear when we talk about the valuable 500 and what the impact the business leadership can have. Then this is the impact that the power of global ERGs can have. So yeah, it's huge.
Yeah, I completely, everything you're saying really resonates. And so we're putting this report out this month. Sources the views and experiences of over 25 other international global ERG leaders like you, Darren. And that is one of the big things that actually, when you talk to global ERG leaders, this interest that goes beyond the traditional kind of, are we a good employer of people with disabilities? Are our products and services accessible to those that do business with our company? To actually, what are the big ticket global disability issues that our company can make an impact on? How can we work together to improve the experiences of people around the world? So that's something that's come is a shared characteristic from the global ERG leaders that we've worked with. I just wondered, lastly, was there anything else that strikes you most about the experiences of those global ERG leaders that have contributed to the resource?
I think first of all, seeing where the presence of these ERGs are, because yes, there were some that obviously matched what we have in terms of the US, the UK. We have obviously some of the major countries in Europe and Australia, but also the amount of other countries that I don't know why I would be surprised, but it was just heartwarming, I suppose, when I see places mentioned in there. I think we had like Argentina, Mexico, Nigeria, Singapore, UAE. You know, there's just so many. I don't know, the 57 countries, I think, if I remember rightly. Which again is just really nice to hear that there's chapters established in all these places. And I you know, I think when we see sort of mapping around that again, it would just you know, give us even more of a kind of pivot to move forward from those things. I think I'm really impressed as well how some of these roles, some of these leader roles, have ended up in just like on C-suite positions, even have they're kind of evolved into having their own disability inclusion type role as well, because of the recognition that's been given to the importance of what it is that they're doing. So I think that's been really interesting to learn about. And I just think that the kind of big picture stuff that they're all interested in, right? Whether that's establishing global accessibility programs like we've been doing here, you know, using obviously things like Purple Light Up and lots of other external movements. I mentioned again the Viable 500, We the 15, many of these movements that just help back up the kind of messages that they're trying to give is incredible. But I think there were some other pieces there as well. We talk a lot about the inclusion into business strategies, but also supporting of each other as colleagues. And certainly through the pandemic, I suppose what we know that many people have felt quite alone. But I think what the ERGs have actually done is incredible in terms of bringing that connection for those people who have felt like that lone person in maybe in a smaller country, or you know, where they've got less employees there, and they can feel alone because of that, but also may feel alone because of their disability. And the fact that there are ERGs that are bringing people together, making it safe to share and have these conversations is so important. I just think that the network piece of it, as we bring employees together, and I suppose ultimately, you know, our vision for Enable at Lilly ultimately is we just say we're here to create a disability confident culture, and I see that is exactly what all these are doing. Maybe their vision might not say exactly the same, but ultimately that's what they're trying to do, whether that's with their colleagues with disabilities, whether that's with allies, or within their organization, and the kind of policies that they're trying to push, or the, you know, changing their processes, all those kind of things. I do just think it's going to be truly amazing when people take a look at this.
Yeah, we're excited for people to see it, and thanks for your input and your support. Well, look, we're pretty much at time, Darren, so it's been a great conversation. Want to thank you for coming on, sharing your insights and your experiences, and thanks for your leadership as well. So not just in Lilly, but for the wider community as well, and to the Purple Space community members that are listening to this. Thanks for tuning in. Of course, don't forget, we'll be diving into this topic, the art and the science of networkology, during October's peer group learning sessions. And check out the website if you want to book on. Darren Rowan himself has also been known to make an appearance in some of those sessions, so you may get to meet the man himself if there's space. But until then, we'll see you next time. Thanks, Darren.
Thank you.